I'm Eileen Hallet Stone. If you can't hear me, then you owe it to me to tell me. And if I talk too fast, you tell me to slow down, okay? I've been writing for years. I've been doing oral histories for years without even realizing that they're oral histories. I interview people, even my parents, even my brother. Of course, I have to say, when you interview your family, you have to put all your thoughts away from you. You know that, don't you? Yeah. You cannot assume anything, which is one of the first things about doing oral history interviews. Don't assume Don't assume a gosh darn thing. I'm from Boston. I was asked to do a job by Tab Uno, who was working out in Sandy City. He called me up one day and said, could you do a walking tour of the old Sandy City? I did not know where the old Sandy City was. I did not know about the houses. So I started looking. I took a drive-by, and here's mine. And it's not a computer. I don't know if you can see it. It's handwritten. Do you remember handwriting? This is handwritten, 1 to 32 or something. In fact, I took my son. He had type of a flu, and we had to stay home. And so I put blankets and everything in the car, and that's C-A-R, and we took a drive. I looked at houses like you wouldn't believe. And then it wasn't enough for me to do that. I took pictures of everything that I saw. Pictures of buildings and banks and houses. Did I know anything about the buildings and banks and houses? Not a gosh darn thing. I knew nothing except they were old. The picket fence was old. The houses, some were kind of run down. Oh, by the way, tell me when I'm 15 minutes, will you?
Not yet.
Okay, because I could talk, I don't want to talk forever, and you don't want to hear it forever. These houses were captivating to me. Who lived there? When were they built? How did people live? Do you know, by the way, that Sandy City at the depot or the tracks has the oldest grass living? Did you know that? I did not know that until I started looking around, which is this, you don't have to write this down, this is not a test. The whole thing is keep open. I'm going out to look at houses, and I am open to everything else that's around me. If you're going to do an interview, an oral history interview, whether it's about a place of building, a sense of self, a sense of family, or of community, keep open, because you know what happens when you're not open? You don't hear right. You don't see right. You come with these preconceived notions, especially if it's different than what you're accustomed to. So as an oral historian, I have to wake up myself. I have to rid myself of any kind of bias I think I might have, and God help me, sorry, I know, that's G-D, I know that I have biases because I'm a woman who's still not being paid the right amount of money in today's times. So, I looked around at everything, I took pictures, I went to a meeting, but that wasn't enough for them. I had to learn more. So where do you find out about these houses, these buildings? I was not as savvy as you are, this is a long time ago. So I went to the Sandy City, to their big building, and I said, didn't anyone do any kind of survey about these houses? Because I knew that they had. And all of a sudden, I got these intensive survey papers that told me everything about the houses. And not only that, where they were in the old street, and how they were built, and who lived there. So I had 34 places of interest. Okay, 25 places of interest. And then I thought, okay, I have this. I need to talk to people. You know what? Because memory is so crucial. I want to know about the town, this 1 mile. I want to know about the people. I am not that smart a person, so I need help all the time. And I had to find people, and I did. I found people to interview. I was guided. This man is Theodore Pete Houston. Do you know he doesn't know why he got the name of Pete? But he's been called Pete forever. So I started thinking, if I'm going to interview, I want anything they say And that's the point. When you do an interview, don't just have your 5 questions or 30 questions. Be open. Be confident in yourself. Make the person you're interviewing, that's the person you want to have to become, beautiful. You want his or her words to become important. Don't worry about yourself. Help the person who's talking, telling you, keep that person in focus. Don't override the interview. You do not have to prove, you don't have to write this down, but you could. You do not have to prove that you're as smart as the person you're interviewing. Do you know what I mean by that? What do I mean by that? You're wasting my sentence, my seconds are going. If you think you know everything, why are you even interviewing that person? If you think you have the answers to everything, why are you doing that? Are you trying to tell that person that you're as smart as they are? Is that the point of an interview? It isn't. You know, these things are so cool, you have to open up one thing. And hopefully you get to drink, which I don't think I can do. The whole point of interviewing is don't lock yourself out. Don't say, I can't do this, and then go ahead and do it with that attitude. And don't be afraid to do it. I have made an ass of myself, and I think I can say that word, several times because I overspoke. I got too involved. I wanted them to like me. You know, they'll like you if you are just you. You're looking for information. There is no contest here. If you go thinking, I don't know these people, and I don't think I like their culture, does that make a good interview? Would you ever have a good interview if you go in there blind and already determined it's not going to be good? You are a dream come true. I'll interview you with why your fingernails are painted. Huh? A non-technical. Thank you, you saved my life. It was so easy. So when I interview, you have to keep the coast clear. Just ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Do not be afraid to say, I hope I'm not overstepping. But I am curious about this because I know nothing about this. Then they'll teach you. Now, it can work on different ways. I interviewed another person. I think it wasn't Pete, it was another person. And I interviewed him about the rocks that they took down from, Cottonwood Canyon, that went to the church, Ward houses, the church. You can tell I'm not from here. And I'm sitting in his living room, and the kitchen is, in his kitchen, he takes me in the kitchen, he says, would you like some joint fir tea? I went, I never had joint fir tea. Well, as a coffee drinker, it's not quite the same. But he made it for me in the kitchen. And we added a few things like honey and a few other things to it. And I looked around the kitchen, and it was so tidy and it was so neat. It didn't feel like a man's, I shouldn't say that because he'll say I'm biased. But this was a person who really, really kept a kitchen. And he looked at me out of the blue, and we had been talking for a half an hour, and he said, I didn't kill my wife. Oh, I have 2 glasses. Would you like a glass? Would you like a glass? Does that shave off my seconds? You tell me. So, what do you do when you're going to interview someone about how a house was built, and he tells you he didn't kill his wife? Well, what would you do? Right in front.
Look for the accident.
And you could, but would you get the story?
I want the story.
Yeah, you got to get that story. When you're doing oral histories, when you're learning about people, you go for the story. And I said, I won't put it in the paper, and this is the walking tour that I did. I don't have enough copies here. That's the only one. I won't put it in, but I would love to hear your story, and I will write it down with the interview. And maybe sometime down the road, you might want to revise it. You might want me to bring it up. And he told me a story. It was unbelievable. And no, he did not kill his wife. He didn't. Somebody else did. He didn't kill. So that was the second thing I did, was do these interviews. Then I had to find information like you were talking about, the validity of some of this stuff. So what do? I love newspapers. I'm a paper person. I'm a word person. I talk a lot too. That's why they talk with me, because I talk a lot and it's just to shut me up. But that's okay with me if they can tell me something. So I started looking at newspapers. And you can get a lot from newspapers. And then all of a sudden, I went up to the special collections at the University of Utah. I found more information there. I talked to friends. I would not be afraid of doing it. I'm not a university person. I'm not up. My husband is there, but I'm not there. And sometimes you get nervous, don't you think, when you start something, you think, I don't know, am I doing this right? How do I get up there? How do I find this information? I'm terrified of calling somebody. Well, you have to sort of say, I might be terrified, but I'm also fearless. I will find out how to get more information. And so you do that. I also looked at other recipes for cooking, because one of the most amazing things when you interview, if you're doing oral histories, oh my gosh, go for the recipes. Recipes of families will get you them talking about more and more. Don't you agree? Yeah, those recipes are great, and they will open the door more. There was a lot to this walking tour. If anyone wants to see it afterwards, I can do that. I did this activity, study guide for students and teachers. It's a little bit old, and you might find stuff and say, I wouldn't have put it that way. But actually, it's interesting, because if you start small, just ask yourself, what is it I want to ask? What is it I want to do with what I have? Am I doing it for my family? Which, if you're doing it for the family, don't do it all together. You don't have to write it down, but you could. Separate them. If you're interviewing a husband and wife, do not do it together. You separate them. If you're doing a man of great, owns a lot of apartments, a lot of business downtown, which I have done, you sit a little bit lower than that person, because then he's teaching you. Try not to interrupt. I did a class, and a fellow who was doing an interview said to me later, after he did the interview, he said, I can't believe myself. I got so nervous doing that interview, I forgot to listen. So when it came to ask the next question, I didn't have it to ask. I keep a little book. Notice how little it is. If it were a napkin, it would be better for me. I like to write on napkins. If you're going to take notes, don't just take up your cell phone and write down, and while you're interviewing, take your pen and pencil, and your paper, and just write something. If you don't understand words, I've interviewed people from all over the world, and I don't know. I don't speak any language except English. I don't know the streets. Ask them. Don't constantly stop your interview to get a spelling. Do some homework before. Talk to the person on the phone, just to get some things. Can you help me with some of the spelling? Mr. Spiegel was fabulous. He wrote so much for me, I never had to ask a word how to spell. And that interview went so smoothly, and it was a tough interview, which is another thing. How do you talk to somebody when the interview is hard? How do you talk to your mother who's lost her husband, your father? How do you talk to a cousin? How do you talk to a friend who's going through a crisis? When you interview, you really are not supposed to cry, they say, because then you stop it. You can't be the person. You have empathy, and you can feel it. When I interviewed a man who was in a concentration camp, I didn't think I could survive the interview because he was so descriptive. So I had to step back, and that's the other thing. Step back in yourself, because you want to get the best of the interview. Another thing is, don't talk through the interview. I hope this helps you. Use your face. It's easy for me because I make lots of faces. I never like to have pictures of me because I look pretty ugly, so don't do that to me. You use your faces. You go. Use your faces. Because if you keep saying, whatever you're speaking into for that interview, if you're taking a tape or any kind of recording, that's what you'll hear. Uh-huh. And you go, oh my God, why the heck did I do that? The other thing is that you don't, and I hate to keep saying don't do's, but you got to know not to do them. So, don't moralize. Don't judge. Don't criticize. Don't lecture. Don't dominate. Don't interrupt, which is really hard because you want to sometimes kind of want to interrupt. Don't interrupt. Let the persons talk. Don't be sarcastic. Don't be glib. Don't be the smart person you really are. I go in dumb every time. Not stupid. Dumb. Quiet. You see me here, when you see me, if you're with me when I interview, I'm not the same person. You can't be the same person. I try not to take my personal problems into the interview. Don't you either. Don't get caught up. If someone shows you lots of pictures, wants to show you a lot of photographs, that's fine. Pick 5. Because what happens if they show you 125? What happens to that interview? You go nowhere. And what do you hear on your, if you're doing it by tape? Oh, this is when I went somewhere with my cousin, we went down here, and we did that. You don't even know where they're going. Pick 5. If you're going to interview someone, maybe you could even ask their family if they have questions. That's really nice, because if they have questions to ask, you can ask those questions. It's about getting information. You're not out to embarrass anybody. You just want to get them. You want to be timely when you go, when you interview. If you say they're going to be there at 1:20, have I passed my 18 minutes?
Yeah.
Well, that's it. I'm done.
It was good.
Was it okay? Do you want me to, what do you want?
You can always wrap it up.
I'm going to wrap it up by saying, be who you are. Do not be afraid. This is not an intellectual contest. This is about learning. You talk to a person who lived in a house that you want to know about the house, you learn more. I learned more about these houses by talking to these people who told me. I also learned about the Depression. I learned there's a bar in Sandy that was called Damn If I Know. That was a great story. I learned so much, and I learned it from people who were struggling with their own mind, with their own, some of them had forms of dementia. If you talk to someone, and it's on my paper, you can ask them the question 3 times over. It's okay. You know, you're not on a race to get information. You're on a journey to get information. Become part of that journey and make the person you're interviewing feel pretty damn good that he's interviewing or she's interviewing with you. Otherwise, you won't get the story. So that's it in a nutshell.